So this is flip video 5.5, economic growth. So what exactly is economic growth? Well, economic growth is our ability to increase our potential output. So if we think all the way back to Unit 1, we saw economic growth on our production possibilities curve. When our PPC shifts outward, that is economic growth. And then we looked at economic growth in Unit 2 with all of our economic indicators. And then in Unit 3, we also looked at economic growth on our market economy when we would move long-run aggregate supply to the right, reflecting that increase in our potential output. So how do we actually get that increase in our potential output? Well, just like what we talked about with our production possibilities curve and changing long-run aggregate supply, it's increases in physical capital. So these are capital goods. So when we have more machines, more factory space, more equipment, more tools to make other goods, we're able to increase our potential output. Increases in human capital is improvement in our labor force. So the more educated our labor force is, the more knowledge that our labor force has, they are going to be able to increase our potential output. So that's like problem solving skills, it's teamwork, it's the ability to create a faster method to make a product or a more sustainable method of creating a product or a service. And then finally, increases in technology. So that's just increasing our technological needs and means to produce goods and services. So how do we actually encourage economic growth? How do we make sure that economic growth is always going to happen? So we really want to make sure that our government policies are written with economic growth in mind. Doesn't make any sense for there to be government policy that actively destroys economic growth. That's not very beneficial to us and to other nations and countries. So we need to have government policies that focus on creating stable infrastructure. So that means making sure our roads work. That means making sure people have access to power. That means our port cities are run efficiently. That means we have access to information networks. So that's like the internet. Believe it or not, there's quite a few places in the US that actually don't have access to the internet. And so we need to create policies that provide access to the internet. And then also create stable infrastructure through physical capital, so machinery, equipment, building space that's going to support economic activity. We also should have government policies that focus on spending money on education, and that is so we can improve our workforce. We can make a more educated, more knowledgeable workforce that's able to solve more complex problems. We also should have policies that support research and development. So that could be something that's promoting technological progress. That could also be programs and money that is going towards creating better drugs for treatments of various diseases. Can also go towards like scholarship programs as well, and encouraging innovation to solve complex problems. We also want to make sure our government policies have the sustainability in mind. Remember, our resources are limited. So capital, entrepreneurship, land, and labor, those are extremely limited resources. So we want to make sure that we are practicing sustainable practices. We want to make sure we're protecting those resources, protecting our environment for the future. And we also want to encourage people to save money. So if you think back to our loanable funds market, when we increase the savings, which is increase the supply of loanable funds, that will decrease or lower the real interest rate, which will then increase investment spending, which is that spending on physical capital to increase growth. So we need to have government policies that encourage people to save money. We want to have rewards for saving money. which is why a lot of bank accounts, our major commercial banks actually reward you with interest on your savings accounts because we want you to save money. So we're providing loans for businesses to grow. So how do we measure economic growth? So there's two ways that we can measure economic growth. First is through real GDP per capita, which is GDP divided by the population. And this allows for a true comparison year to year of economic productivity and growth. And then the other way that we can measure growth is through the rule of 70, which just tells us the time it takes for a variable that grows gradually over time to double. So we can use both of those to measure growth. You won't have to calculate those, you just need to know what they are. So what exactly does growth look like? Well, Jacob Clifford is going to show us what growth looks like on our market economy.
Hi, good evening. This is the first time for ACC Economics. We're talking about growth, economic growth. What I have here is the aggregate demand, average supply, currently at full employment, and I have a production cost curve showing you this point and that point when they might be at full employment out. Okay, my question is simple. If there's an increase in investment, what's going to happen to aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and eventually long average supply if there's an increase in investment, net investment? What I want you to do is I want you to draw the shift that occurs up here and see if you can figure out what does it look like down here on the production cost curve. I'll get out of your way, you left. Okay. Now, the first step is always remembering that investment is not stocks and bonds or your parents' retirement. Investment is when companies take out loans and they improve their own company. They buy machinery and stuff like that. And so the first thing you want to know is aggregate demand is going to increase. The reason why aggregate demand is going to go up is because investment is a shifter of aggregate demand. Right? So the first thing that happens is the companies are going to demand more machinery, more robots, and more tools, and more other things they need for their factories and to produce stuff, right? Increase in aggregate demand. Now, don't stop though. When there's an increase in capital, when there's more machinery and there's more robots and things to produce stuff, what happens to the aggregate supply? Well, that is also going to increase. So aggregate supply is going to shift to the right because now we can produce more stuff. So we went from here to here, now we are here. Next question is, what happens to the long average supply? The answer is going to go up. This is called economic growth. The reason why the long average supply increases is because now we can produce more than we ever could before. The new output that we're going to produce in the long run is now greater than it was before because now we have more machinery, more capital, more tools. Now, that makes sense here, from let's say point A to point B, how do you show it here? Well, it's simple, A to B. Now remember back in year one, production cost curve shows what we're able to produce. Right? Point B was impossible before. Just like being out here was impossible. We couldn't maintain a GDP that's out here. But we have more machines, more capital, we can actually get somewhere that was obtainable, and now that's our full employment. All right, the concept of the long average supply shifting to the right is just the same as the production cost curve shifting out. Okay, hopefully it makes sense. Until next time.